Auburn is going to bring back one of the best young guards in college basketball for the 2025-2026 season, and they're not going to have to hit the complete reset button with their roster.
I kept focusing on what Tahaad had to gain by coming back for another year. I kept thinking about with a new role and a new team and the spotlight completely on Tahaad when you thought about Auburn basketball this season, it would allow him to present something different to the NBA than what he did in his first year. Now, if the NBA thought that he did enough in year one to deserve serious consideration in the first round, and there were enough teams willing to go, then it ultimately it probably wouldn't matter what he could do in that second year because he would have already made enough of an impression. But instead, he has the chance to not only have this enormous season for Auburn basketball, but play his way back into NBA draft consideration a year from now. And as tough as it must be to walk away from an NBA draft where you probably would have been selected, right? At some point, he would have heard his name called and he would have been part of an NBA team. And to walk away from that and come back to college basketball for a guy who's been dreaming about playing in the NBA, it had to be difficult. And it's probably part of the reason why it took him until the deadline.
I mean, he was working out with teams all up to deadline day.
But I think ultimately my belief that he was coming back was centered on what he stood to gain if he had the kind of season that people think he can have in 2025-26.
Yeah, I've said it before. If you look at the 2026 NBA draft class, not heavy on elite point guards. This point guard class, Tahaad was probably, there were a handful of guys ahead of him. And that was going to be something to keep an eye on. Now, look, some people were talking about with Tahaad, it's like, okay, he's not going to get any taller. Maybe this is, strike when the iron's hot. The league likes youth and potential and upside more than anything. But there is value in there because, Dan, as you have said several times throughout this process, and I think it's a really good point that people may not be focusing on enough, it's not like Tahaad Pettiford peaked as a college basketball player last season. He was a sixth man. He played the sixth most minutes on this Auburn basketball team last season. Now, he had a superstar.
And it's in contrast to Sharif's role.
Correct.